Уважаемые участники, добрый день. Рада приветствовать вас. А, Добрый вечер, наверное, даже уже сейчас будет правильнее сказать. Мы рады приветствовать вас на вебинаре профессора Московской школы управления Сколково Джорджа Сифри. Меня зовут Анастасия Кузнецова, я менеджер программы «Сложные проекты управления рисками». Вебинар наш пройдет на английском языке с синхронным переводом на русский язык. И сейчас хотелось бы уделить буквально минутку-две организационным моментом для того, чтобы вам комфортно было присутствовать на вебинаре. Для удобства мы рекомендуем выбирать режим просмотра, вид, параллельный режим докладчика. Если вы находитесь на вебинаре с компьютера, в правом верхнем углу кнопка «Вид», параллельно докладчик, так вам будет удобнее, вы будете видеть слайды и видеть Джорджа. Мы намеренно, принудительно выключаем у всех микрофоны для того, чтобы не было помех, чтобы профессора было хорошо слышно. Если у вас возникнут какие-то вопросы, вы можете написать их в чат. Мы протранслируем Джорджу их после основной его части в блоке «Вопрос-ответ». Если же, опять же, вы захотите что-то прокомментировать, вы можете либо поднять руку, либо нажать микрофон, нам придет уведомление, и мы принудительно вручную включим вам микрофон и, конечно же, дадим слово. Если вы знаете оба языка, то в правом нижнем углу у вас есть значок глобуса, вы можете на него нажать и слушать в оригинале. Если же вы хотите слушать на русском языке, с нами есть наш переводчик Мария. Для этого вам нужно переключиться на русский канал и слушать перевод на русском языке. Джордж, я на этом завершаю свою вводную часть. Мы рады тебя видеть. Я передаю тебе слово.
Vasiva Anastasia, Vasiva Maria. Thank you very much for that. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on data-driven project management. My name is Dr. George Sifri, and I'm delighted to have you here. As a professor of project management at the Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo, I have had the privilege of working with organizations across many industries, whether it is IT, oil and gas, education, and services, helping them actually to use data to transform how they deliver projects. So what is the purpose really of this webinar? Today, we are going to explore how data analytics, dashboards, and key performance metrics can empower project leaders and teams in order to move beyond intuition and assumptions, making decisions that are faster, smarter, and more reliable. We'll look at real-world examples. We're going to examine best practices, and we're going to discuss how data can enhance visibility, improve communication, and boost collaboration. By the end of this session, you are going to have a practical insights into how to, number one, use data for informed decision-making. Number two, focus on the right metrics. Number three, leverage dashboards for communication. And number four, to build collaboration through transparencies. I encourage you to submit your questions through the chat window at any time during the webinar. I'll address them during the Q&A session at the end. Now, sharing your own experiences and challenges will actually make this session more interactive and relevant to your contexts. So let's begin our journey into data-driven project management by looking at why data has become such a critical factor in project success. Data-driven project management begins with three core pillars. You can think about them as three foundations. The first one is data analysis. The second one is metric tracking. And the third one is the dashboard utilization. We need to have those three pillars in place, really, to be able to do proper data-driven project management. Together, they enable project leaders in order to move from assumption-based decisions to evidence-based actions, ensuring that we have greater confidence and control in outcomes. When we're talking about assumption-based decisions, an assumption by definition is a certain condition that we take for granted to be true, certain, or real. And typically this is the approach that we use for fast thinking. While when we are talking about evidence-based actions, we're actually talking about slow thinking. And we need to have the balance between both. However, data enables, in other words, evidence-based actions, or what we refer to as the slow thinking approach. So, number one, data analysis. Data analysis is the practice of using analytical tools in order to assess project performance. And by grounding decisions in evidence rather than intuition, uncertainty is reduced and objectives are more likely to be achieved. Examples from IT teams, they analyze the sprint velocity and the backlog data to forecast release readiness. In oil and gas, engineers can actually go ahead and use drilling performance data and predictive models in order to anticipate equipment failures before actually they happen. In education, administrators, they monitor student engagement data in online learning platforms in order to identify learners at risk of falling behind. If we're talking about services industry, then manager, they review customer survey data and service ticket patterns in order to improve quality of delivery. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is metric tracking. If you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. So metric tracking is really about monitoring key performance indicators continuously. Timely insights on budget, timelines, risk, scope, quality, human resources, stakeholders management, etc. It allows for quick adjustments and keep projects aligned with objectives. Again, to take examples from different industries in order to clarify that particular concept of metric tracking. So in IT, if I'm talking about, let's say, code quality metrics and defect density, they are tracked alongside sprint progress. If I'm talking about oil and gas, then the rig utilization rates and safety incidents frequency are monitored on daily basis. If I'm talking about education, then enrollment to faculty ratios, in other words, how many students are enrolled compared to how many, let's say, faculty members do we have, and exam pass rates are reviewed in order to ensure resource balance, that we have sufficient instructors or professors compared to the number of students that are enrolled. If we're talking about services, then utilizations of consultants and project profitability are actually monitored in real time. So that's, again, the second pillar of data-driven project management. The third one is the dashboard utilization. So dashboards, they transform raw data into clear, visual formats that everyone can understand at a glance. They support collaboration by ensuring that stakeholders, they share a single version of the truth. Think about dashboards as the dashboards that you have in your car. The dashboard that you have in your car enables you actually to go ahead and to get vital information about the health of the car. So for example, you have one indicator that shows the temperature of the engine, another indicator that shows, well, how much petrol is actually left in the tank. A third one shows if there is any kind of a problem with oil. A fourth one shows if, for example, any of the doors are not properly locked, etc. So if we take that concept now and we apply it to different industries, So we go ahead and we take agile teams that rely on dashboards that display sprint progress, backlog health, and release readiness. If we're talking about oil and gas, I have seen executives on their mobile app tracking drilling progress, cost variance, and safety metrics through integrated dashboards on their mobile apps. Education, teachers, and administrators, they monitor student performance and attendance via digital dashboards. Services, consulting firms, they use dashboards in order to show real-time project profitability, client satisfaction, and resource allocation. And we're obviously going to see example of these dashboards. So these three building blocks, analysis, tracking, and dashboards, they provide the foundation for managing projects with greater transparency, agility, accuracy across many industries. At this point in time, we're ready to go ahead and to explore why data has become such a critical factor in driving project success. So data plays a critical role in driving project success because it strengthens decision-making, it improves foresight, it ensures alignment, and it builds trust among stakeholders. These are the four major benefits that illustrate its importance. Data enables project leaders to make choices grounded in facts rather than assumptions, as I mentioned before. Better decisions lead to stronger outcomes or to better outcomes. This is what we mean by the first item here, which is informed decisions. So in IT, if we are analyzing real-time bug reports to decide whether to release a software update or delay for further testing. If I'm talking about oil and gas, using drilling performance data to decide whether to continue operations or suspend for equipment checks. If we're talking about education, leveraging student performance analytics to identify when extra tutoring should be offered. And when we're talking about services, relying on customer feedback trends to adjust staffing or service design. So these are all examples that will enable us actually to go ahead and to make informed decisions by actually using this data and analyzing it in order to make those informed decisions. The next item is risk management. So analytics highlight risks early, giving managers the time in order to prevent issues from escalating. Example, if we're talking about IT, well, monitoring security logs to detect vulnerabilities before a cyber attack occurs. Oil and gas, using predictive analytics to anticipate equipment failure and schedule preventive maintenance. If we're talking about education, identifying risk of low attendance early in the semester to avoid poor course outcomes. And if we're looking at services, then spotting high employee turnover rates as a risk to client delivery. The third one is performance tracking. So KPIs or key performance indicators, they ensure that projects remain on schedule and within budget, creating accountability across teams, like monitoring the sprint burn down charts to keep product releases on track, or reviewing graduation rates against planned targets, or comparing actual billable hours against contractual commitments. When we talk about performance tracking, I mean, literally, we need to know where we are, we need to know where should we be at this point in time, and we need to understand the gap and how we are going actually to go ahead and overcome this gap. So performance tracking would give us this information because we are actually looking at where we should be at this point in time and where we are at this point in time, which is enable us to go to number one, to make informed decisions. And then finally, we all know that the glue that ties together the whole project is communication. So really stakeholders' engagement comes from really communicating to these stakeholders information about their needs, about their concerns, about what do they expect from you. So dashboard and data visualization communicate progress clearly and build confidence among stakeholders. Imagine that you are a key stakeholder in the project, and what you really need to do is just to look at a plasma screen, for example, and basically what you see are the vital indicators of the project as of this moment, okay? This is real-time data. So sharing live dashboards with executives, showing, for example, project health, giving parents and teachers real-time access to student performance dashboards, providing clients with transparent dashboards showing progress and value delivery. This would all enhance the relationship that we have with stakeholders. So when data is used to inform decisions, anticipate risk, track performance, and engage stakeholders, project outcomes are not only predictable, but also more sustainable. So having seen the benefits of data, now let's go ahead and explore how the shift from intuition to evidence-based decision-making changes the way that projects are managed. All right. So project decisions can be made either through intuition or by relying on evidence. The intuition is often driven by personal experience and feelings. Evidence-based decisions are grounded in facts, data, and analysis. So let's compare the two approaches. The first one is subjective versus objective. So when we talk about intuitive decisions, well, obviously, we're not talking about a special channel that you have with God that would give you intuition on what to do. Okay? It is really a subjective approach, and it is often based on hunches, while evidence-based decisions are objective and they are backed by measurable data. Typically, the intuitions is based on your previous experience. So, based on what you have seen before, you go ahead and you make a guess, okay? So, to take an example of subjective versus objective, a manager might feel, this is a feeling, based on his or her own experience, that a product is ready for release. But, I believe that the product is ready for release, or I think that the product is ready for release. But eventually, objective bug tracking data may show otherwise. If we're talking about oil and gas, a drilling supervisor may rely on personal judgment, while sensor data provides objective pressure readings that should guide actions. Educations. Teachers may assume students are engaged. Tell me about it. But learning analytics reveal which ones are struggling. Services, a consultant may actually believe that a client is satisfied, but survey results might show dissatisfaction. Well, this is very common. Like you believe that the customer is very happy, and the customer is smiling at you, and the customer is basically having nice time with you, and he's very friendly, and then you discover that actually he was not satisfied at all. All right, So there is a difference here between, having an intuition and having an evidence-based, let's say, decision. Inconsistent versus consistent. If you have a specific process that you are following for making decisions based on specific, let's say, evidence, then it provides uniformity and transparency. On the other hand, when we are talking about subjective, this basically is dependent on the person. And that is going to result in inconsistent approach. So different project leads might actually prioritize features differently. But KPIs, like for example, sprint velocity, create consistency across teams. In oil and gas, without data, safety risk assessments differ between managers. But analytics create actually consistent benchmarks. Client expectations may be interpreted differently by account manager, but the net promoter score offers some kind of a consistent measurement. Time-consuming versus efficient. So intuition often requires lengthy debates and consensus building, while evidence-based decisions, they leverage readily available metrics, making decisions faster and more reliable. For example, long discussions on whether equipment should be replaced versus predictive maintenance, dashboards can give actually a clear answer. Endless client discussions on service quality versus real-time dashboard matrix showing resolution times and satisfaction scores, evidence-based. So moving from intuition to evidence-based decision-making provides objectivity, consistency, and efficiency. So across industries, this shift ensures that decisions are not only smarter, but also more transparent and defensible. So now that we have compared intuition and evidence-based approaches, the next step is to focus on which performance indicators matter most for managing projects effectively. When you think about a project, and here I'm actually talking about generic project management. I'm not really talking about project management which is related to a particular industry. And one of the things that you can do is you can add the KPIs, or you can add what you are actually tracking depending on the industry that you are dealing with. And actually, I will give you some examples soon. So if you look at a project, you will notice that a project actually consists of multiple dimensions. So there is scope, there is the schedule, there is the cost, there is basically the quality, the human resources, there is risk, there is communication, there is stakeholders management, there's procurement, there is, eventually, I think I mentioned risk management. So the thing here is, what you really want to do is you want actually to have KPIs, and I'm not talking here about a large number of KPIs. I'm actually talking about a limited number of KPIs. The smaller the set, the better we are. But eventually those KPIs will enable us to look at each one of these dimensions and understand, the status of each one of these dimensions. Some of these KPIs are going to be leading KPIs, which literally means they enable us to predict, like, for example, the cost performance index, which will enable us to forecast costs. And some of them are actually trailing KPIs. In other words, they are able to give us, well, after the fact, what happens. Like, for example, cost variance or schedule variance. At this point in time, I know what the variance is, all right? But this is now, too late. While if I have CPI or cost performance index or team development index, then eventually I can predict how the performance of the project is going to be. Okay? So cost performance index is one example of KPIs, which is a leading KPI that we use for cost. If I'm talking, for example, about team development index, this is really about human resources and how integrated the team is and how much the team has let's say, same understanding or a uniform understanding or a unified understanding, of the problem that they are trying to solve or the opportunity that they are trying to leverage, or eventually any kind of, risks that they have to deal with. When it comes, for example, to scope, well, again, here we could be talking about whether project objectives and deliverables, they match what was agreed. Tracking scope creep in this case is critical, which is uncontrolled changes to the scope of the project. When we're talking about, quality, we could be talking about that we are using KPI to assess deliverables and to make sure that these deliverables, they meet the required standards and satisfy stakeholders before user acceptance testing or factory acceptance testing. When we talk about risk, we could be trying to identify potential threats early, enabling mitigation strategy, like, for example, the risks of low enrollment or faculty shortages in a certain university, or high staff turnover impacting, for example, client delivery. We're talking here also about resources, like, for example, rig utilization rates across drilling programs, teacher to student ratios. These are KPIs that measure how effectively human and physical resources are utilized. High or low utilization can both signal inefficiency. So in a nutshell, we need to have the appropriate combinations of KPIs that would allow us to give us a comprehensive, yet we are not talking about a huge number of KPIs, maybe like a maximum of 7 KPIs that can actually give us a good understanding of the status of the project. Now, if your project is in oil and gas, or if your project is in software industry, or your project, for example, is in, let's say, education, then you can go ahead and add the specific KPIs that are related, let's say, to your own industry. Keeping in mind here that you need to have both the forest view and the trees view. So, you need to be able to drill down from a helicopter view of basically the project, and then to drill down, all right, to the details. Not everybody wants to see the details, and not everybody is only satisfied with the high-level view. So somehow you need to have the capability to do so. And this is relatively easy with dashboards. This is relatively easy with today's tools that are available. And by the way, most of these tools are free. So now that we have defined the key indicators, the next step actually is to explore how performance metrics, they provide deeper visibility into project progress and success. Okay? So moving on then, this is an example here. Performance metrics, they provide a detailed view of how well projects are progressing. They go beyond raw data, and they tell us what is working, what needs adjustments, what and where risks may arise. So let's go ahead and look at 4 core here. Core matrix, the schedule variance, the cost variance, the risk exposure, and the resource utilization. Okay? So with the schedule variance, this basically shows whether the project is on track compared to the planned schedule, or whether the project is behind schedule. Okay? So a variance of 0 days means that there are no delays. However, here we have to be very careful, because if we are using the earned value management system, we need also to take into consideration things like the critical path and the float, etc., which could also give us, in this case, leading indicators. But that's something that is really related to monitor and control your project. This is not about dashboards. This is about, literally how do you go ahead, monitor and control your, project through understanding of these, or selection and calculations of these KPIs. Okay. The cost performance index, CPI here. Well, cost performance index is one of the very, very important indicators or KPIs, because actually it allows us, to go ahead and to predict what the final cost of the project is going to be. And this is defined as the earned value divided by the actual cost. So if CPI is greater than 1, it means we are experiencing budget underrun. In other words, we are spending less money, for doing the same amount of work. While if CPI is less than 1, it means that we are experiencing unfavorable cost variances, or what we refer to as cost overrun. Okay, so this is a very important indicator, not only because it gives us this information if we are over budget or under budget, but also it allows us to predict. It allows us to predict, for example, what the final costs are going to be, once we have completed a specific percentage of the work. Very, very important indicator. Then we have the risk exposure, all right? And basically here, the risk exposure, it shows how vulnerable the project is to potential issues. Now, I have to be very specific here because, sometimes in dashboards, they use like different terminology. So if I really want to focus on exposure, exposure really is the impact of the probability, the product of the probability times the impact of the threat. It's the probability times the impact of the threat. That's risk exposure. So, when we go ahead and we say, what is the exposure of this project? We look at all the remaining threats that we have, and we basically calculate the probability times the impact of all the residual threats, and we sum them. Minus, obviously, let's say, this is for the exposure. For the leverage, we just go ahead and take, the opportunity. So the risk exposure really is the sum of the expected monetary value of all the residual threats. Obviously, the bigger the number is, the more vulnerable is this, project. And it's very important also to look at trends. It's very important to look at trends. If the exposure is getting, let's say, higher or getting lower, or it is flat, that's why at the end you can see the trend there, right? And then the resource utilization, which basically tracks whether resources are being used optimally. Utilization that is too high or too low indicates inefficiency, okay? Because if we are talking about too low, this means that there are a lot of, let's say, resources that are not being utilized, properly, so they are underutilized. And if resources are overutilized, specifically human beings, then in many of these industries, when you are overutilizing somebody, at one point in time, what is going to happen is that person is going to have fatigue, that person, attention to details is going to decrease, and that person is going to commit more and more defects that are actually going to create, let's say, problems and maybe, safety incidents, for this, okay? So that is a very important piece of information. Now, if you look at the bottom, if you go ahead and you look at the bottom of this, screen or slide, then you have the insights from matrix, all right? So first, it's visibility. So this enhances, this enhanced data makes project status transparent and reduces blind spots. Decision-making, evidence-backed choices, minimizes uncertainty and support corrective action. Now, the reason for that, I'm going to assume that most people are logical. So if you are able to show them a compelling story, typically they accept it, typically they go with it. So if you are showing them this data live, and you are trusting you that you are not massaging the numbers, you're not actually playing with these numbers, then eventually there is a very high chance that they are actually going to support you in your recommendation. Engagements, dashboards improve stakeholders' involvement by making progress visible to all parties. You are giving them the perception that they are in control. By providing them with this information, by making it visible, by making access to this information that is relevant to them, visible to them, and easily accessible to them, you're giving them the perception that they are in control. And if they have the perception that they are in control, again, there is a higher tendency to go ahead and to support you with basically your decisions or your recommendations. So with better visibility in place, the next step is actually to see how data strengthens project transparencies across all organization levels. And, it is time actually now to think about layers, to think about, how are we going to develop it in such a way to satisfy the information needs of the different layers of the organization. That's an extremely important concept. Okay? Allow me 1 minute. I just need to drink waters. Sorry for that. Okay. So, as we mentioned before, data enhances visibility and transparency across every level of a project, from the strategic vision of executives to the day-to-day accountability of individual team members. So let's look at how data supports decision-making at 4 levels: the strategic level, the tactical level, the operational level, and the individual level. Now, when we're talking about the strategic level, this is basically talking about ensuring that the projects, they align with the organizational goals and the long-term strategy. Now, keeping in mind that when you select a certain project and you start, let's say, delivering that project, you start actually, doing the engineering design, the front-end engineering design, the detailed engineering design, etc., depending on the industry that you are in, things may change. And the project may not actually be aligned anymore with the business strategy. So at the strategy level, executives want to make sure that every single project that they have in the portfolio, okay, that it is actually aligned with organizational goals and long-term strategy. And this is going to provide leaders with confidence that investments are driving value. So they want, for example, an update of what is the, let's say, forecasted net present value for this investment. What is the forecasted net IRR, internal rate of return, for this investment, etc. So executives, they use portfolio dashboards. So there is a dashboard for a project and there is a dashboard for a portfolio, okay? And, when we talk about a portfolio, we are actually talking about a set of projects and programs and other pieces of work, that are geared towards achieving specific strategic goals and strategic objectives. And executives are going to make decisions, whether these projects or which of these projects is going to move to the next phase, is going to get the resources, is going to be a priority now, number 1, etc. And it is all based on, again, the business drivers. So in this case, the business driver is going to drive the portfolio and not the other way around. Leaders, for example, in oil and gas company, they track capital allocations across drilling programs in order to align with production targets. We're talking about a huge amount of money for drilling. In education, universities, they monitor enrollment and graduation trends to support strategic planning, whatever strategic plans they have, whether it is accreditation, whether it is, being like, the first or the, let's say, a unique university in a particular country or part of the league, Ivy League of universities around the world, etc. From a tactical perspective, tactical data informs execution. So this is going to guide resource allocation, prioritization, risk management at the program or the departmental level or the project level, etc. So now we're talking about really execution. So product managers, for example, allocate resources across multiple sprints in IT, based on workload data. In services, project managers, they distribute consultants across engagements in order to balance the workload. So these are really examples of tactical decisions. Operational decisions, they are focusing on real-time transparency, making it easier to track performance and adjust quickly when challenges arise. For example, in IT, we all know that in agile methodology, we have daily stand-up meetings. Well, what about the daily stand-up meeting can actually result in dashboard displays, let's say, backlog health and testing progress, right? So that's one idea that you can actually go ahead and implement. With education, it could be like the learning management system. For example, many universities or many even like, training companies or professional training companies, what they have is a learning management system. And with the learning management system, they show, for example, the number of live students that are attending online sessions or training on demand or going ahead and submitting their work or how much time did they spend, on a particular, let's say, module, etc. And this is all examples of operationals. Then we have the individual, all right? So when we talk here about the individual level, this data empowers the team members to track their contributions, improve accountability, and collaborate more effectively. Like, for example, developers, when they are using dashboards to see their personal task progress within, let's say, a particular sprint in Agile. Or when teachers monitor their students' performance to adapt teaching methods, okay? Or, for example, when consultants, they see their utilization they see their utilization level and client satisfaction scores in order to align with performance goals, right? So these are all examples of basically dashboards that empower the individual. So when visibility extends from the executive level down to the individual contribution, then transparency becomes part of the culture of the organization. We're not really here talking only about the strategic level. We're talking about strategic, tactical, operational, and individual. All right? And everyone sees the same truth, reducing miscommunication and increasing alignment. Now, I'm not sure if this is like, if many organizations are actually ready for this, because this requires a cultural shift. This really requires sometimes in many organizations, a cultural shift, all right? Being transparent. So building on this, the next focus area is how analytics actually is going to strengthen risk management by turning data into early warning signals. Now, here, we are talking really about leading indicators, not trailing indicators, but leading indicators. Okay, so one of the things that we can do here is we can go ahead and conduct some kind of SWOT analysis. So analytics, it plays a vital role in risk management by providing timely insights, improving decision-making, and reducing uncertainty. And a structured way to understand its role is through a SWOT perspective, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, okay? Now, I have to draw your attention here that depending on the type of the risk that you are tracking. So for example, if the risk is related, let's say, to the schedule, if the risk is related to the scope, if the risk is related to quality, if the risk is related to human resources, there are different KPIs that you can actually go ahead and utilize that will provide you both leading indicators of these particular risks, if they may or may not occur, and trailing indicators to go ahead and to give you an idea if these risks have materialized or not. So in this case, when we're talking about analytics, analytics actually is going to provide us with timely insights to identify and mitigate project risks effectively. And this is going to improve the accuracy of risk assessment and leads to better outcomes. So let's go ahead and have some examples here. Monitoring system in an IT logs, for example, to detect security threats before they escalate. You can see a pattern. You can see, for example, a pattern that eventually you are being subject to attacks. So, this is a leading indicator that eventually there is something that is brewing. Oil and gas, predictive maintenance in oil and gas analytics, preventing equipment failure. Education, student dropout prediction models, helping university intervene early. Services in call center analytics, identifying service bottlenecks before they impact, let's say, the relationship with the clients. These are all examples of strength. When it comes to weakness, over-reliance on data can overshadow human judgment. And that's why at the beginning I said, somehow you need to find the balance between the two, the balance between fast thinking and slow thinking. Okay, fast thinking is based sometimes on intuition, on experience, etc. We need actually to go ahead and to find the balance here. Okay, faulty sensors data, creating false alarms in drilling operations. We have seen this in many cases in oil and gas. We have seen this, for example, in Houston, not the Macondo incident, but in Houston refinery, where eventually there was a false sensor that was giving wrong data about the level of gas in a particular column, and that was false. And eventually everybody depended on this data, but actually that data was false. Okay, customer feedback analytics skewed by small sample sizes. So again here, when you are actually gathering this information, you have to follow the best practices in how to collect the data and what is the size of the sample, etc. All the good stuff that you have learned at the university. Opportunities, well, there are so many opportunities nowadays, mainly that we have a growing, let's say, tendency towards AI-driven analytics. And, the nice thing about AI-driven analytics is that, it actually helps us to go ahead and predict, for example, project delays based on historical data. Okay. Digital twins in oil and gas, they use digital twins simulating scenarios to manage exploration risks. Services like in workforce analytics, predicting turnover risks in client projects. And then there are the threats, which are the rapid changes in technology, may render certain tools to be obsolete, cybersecurity risks threaten data integrity and stakeholders' trust. So, these are things that are also related to threats. In services, unauthorized access to client data creating legal liabilities. That's an example of a threat. So really the key message here is that analytics, it strengthens actually risk management, by making risks visible earlier and decisions more informed, but success requires, balancing the reliance on data with human judgment, keeping technology current and safeguarding information integrity. So you want to make risks visible, you want to detect them earlier so that decisions are more informed. Success requires balancing reliance on data and human judgment, You want to make sure that your technology is current, and you want to safeguard the information integrity. Okay, so with risks managed throughout analytics, let's go ahead and see, for example, visual tools for performance monitoring. So here is an example of a very, very simple dashboard. I mean, really, this is nothing fancy. And again, here I have to draw your attention that in many of these scenarios, in dashboards, the terminology is actually different. So, for example, here you notice that the time overrun, which means that the schedule delay, is 15%, and the trend is increasing. So, the arrow up is showing that this number is increasing, which literally means that this project is taking us longer than planned, and the upward arrow shows that the overrun is increasing. Okay, even though that it shows green, but it is really, we're saying it's increasing, it's bad. Okay, now also in many dashboards, what they do is that they use, they flip the sign. So cost variance is -5%. This basically, in this particular scenario, this is particular scenario here, they're using the -5% as a cost underrun, that you are underrunning, this budget. You are not actually overrunning it. Okay, so that is the cost variance here, and the red, the red arrow is literally indicating that this cost variance is decreasing. In other words, we're getting closer and closer to basically spending according to the budget. Scope changes is 3, which means that there are 3 major, I mean, here, for example, they could be saying that these are major scope changes. Okay, maybe not minor scope changes, but major scope changes. I don't know. We have actually to go ahead and to clarify it. If these are major scope changes, then they want to make sure that major scope changes are properly defined. What do we mean by major scope change? That has to be properly defined. So in this case, we're saying that there are 3 additional scope changes. And then, the risk rating is high. The risk rating is high, but it is actually decreasing. So, in other words, eventually it is getting better, decreasing the risk rating. Remember that the risk rating, this is eventually like the probability times the impact. Okay. Okay. So if you look at the pie chart, so basically the pie chart is telling us that 40% of the project on track, 25% of the project is delayed, 20% of the project is at risk, and 15% of the project is completed. Okay, so this actually makes it easy for stakeholders to understand overall performance at a glance. Right? You can see the legend down at the bottom of the pie. Now, we're assuming that all of this information is basically being fed in real time, all right? And it is being processed by the tool and basically presented here to the, let's say, to the audience. Okay? All right. So let me eventually go ahead now and show you real life examples. These are real life tools. And there are so many tools that are actually available in the market. Interesting enough, the most powerful tools are free. Okay, so the most powerful tools are free. So I'm going to show you one tool, which I think you are all familiar with, and that's Power BI. Okay, so let me go ahead and do something here. Hopefully that this is going to work properly. Okay, so here it is. Stop sharing. All right. Bear with me just 1 minute, and I'll eventually come to you. All right. So here is one example. Let's see. This is Zoom. This is share. And I'm sharing this one here. So share. Can you see it? Anastasia, are you able to see it? All right, brilliant. So this is actually by Power BI. This is a this is a tool which is available, which is bundled actually with Microsoft Office, and you can go ahead and download it and use the there is one which is shared. This is with money if you want to use it across the organization, and this is one which you can use by user. Anyway, the nice thing about it here is that this data actually is coming from a database. So the data is being fed from Microsoft SQL, server, and that's a database. And here, basically, it shows, for example, the number of projects, the total project staff, the number of teams. This is project, let's say, numbers 203. The average, let's say, PV or planned value. The average net duration in days maybe, and basically the number of completed projects. So this give you an idea. And here, as you can move here, you can see eventually what is happening. All the data here is available. Similarly for here. Okay, so which basically the projects for each staff. So you can actually move here and you can see it. Okay, you can actually go ahead and, for example, select here the year. So I want to see only the project that are in 2025. So this would basically show us the projects that are in 2025 only. What are they? I can also go ahead and say, well, not only in 2025, but also in, let's say, the first and the second quarter. Okay, I want to see both. So here's the first and the second quarter. I can see them. All right. I can actually go to the month if I want. I can go ahead and see a specific project. What is the project that I'm actually looking at? So, again, these are all available in Power BI. It is all wizard driven. And the tools are fantastic. You have a lot of tools here. As you can see, you can apply filters, you can add fields, the visualization. This is here the data model, how the data is being organized. So for example, here is the data, and from where you are getting the data, etc. So this is all fantastic. I mean, really I like this tool. Okay. And there are so many tutorials that are available, including a tutorial which is built into the tool itself by Microsoft. And the latest revision incorporates actually artificial intelligence. So, there is one tool here which prepares data for AI, because the data has to be prepared in a particular way so that you are able actually to export it to, for example, a comma delimited, let's say, text, or to an Excel spreadsheet, and then eventually you can load it to ChatGPT, or you can load it to any other AI, let's say, Copilot, which is integrated with it, and conduct all kinds of analysis and use it in order to make predictions. Very powerful tool. This one here, this is another example. This example here basically is only displaying data. So this is updates. This is only showing basically the report date, etc. And you can, go ahead and specify what is the frequency of actually update. So that's another way of eventually looking at it. All right, so let me also go ahead here and show you this. Okay, so this is loading data now, as you can see. And this one here is actually looking at the bill of material and, the checklist and the parts deadline that have been approved. Okay, how many of them, from a specific date to a specific day. Okay, and you can also specify the department, where, or the location where in Denmark, who's the project manager. You can eventually go ahead and select, and these are updated automatically. So in other words, based on Denmark, which project managers are actually located there. Okay, these are all examples that I am showing you. They are all with Power BI. They are all with Power BI. Okay, this one also with Power BI. This one is also very interesting. This one here, it shows actually the approved specs and deliverables. This is from the same let's say workspace. It's much more than a dashboard. And if you have access, then by clicking on this, you can see, for example, the document itself. Like here, it says that the layout has been approved. If you click on this, you can actually go ahead and see the document itself. So, again, this is another, way of showing it. So in a nutshell, these are examples of, let's say, dashboards that uses, Power BI actually to create them. Now, I'm going to show you one more, which is actually very interesting. This is a dashboard by Excel. I mean, nothing fancy, but this is a dashboard by Excel, and the data is being fed to Excel again through a data connector through Microsoft SQL Server. Now, this example is more like around the business, but it is also very interesting. So I will show you, how it looks. And, at this point in time, this is very rough. Okay, so here is one. Okay, so for example, here is the dashboard. The dashboard here is actually showing, for example, the website traffic, the number of pages views, the conversion date, and the new customers. This one is showing the number of orders placed. This one is showing, the revenue. Okay, this one is showing the EBITDA, which is the earning before interest, taxes, and before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. All right, so it shows it. And this is all actually coming, this is for a web project, actually looking at the benefits of this web project after, or website, after it has been completed. So, that is an example of also a dashboard. This is a dashboard. All of this is done by Microsoft Excel. All of it is done by Microsoft Excel. Okay, no additional tool is being used here. Okay, so that being said, if I want ahead now and go and talk about two things actually. This one here. So the one that we have here is actually talking about the best. Okay. All right. Still no change. Thanks for bringing it up, though my connection was bad. We currently see only the very first dashboard. Same for me. Okay, wow. So the only first dashboard, which was the Power BI, that was the only one that they saw. Let me see. Okay, so let me go ahead and do something here. Share. Okay, so I'm not sharing anything. Now you don't see anything, correct, Maria? Nothing. All right, that's good. At least we start with something. Okay, so let's go ahead and end this slideshow. So this slideshow is done. All right. So in this case, let me go ahead then and do something here. So I want to share. Okay. So here, what I would do is I want to share. So share. All right. And I want to share. Right. Have you seen this? Let me just show it. Have you seen this before? Okay, so that's the one that they already saw. Okay, all right. So let me show them the next one then. So here is the next one. All right. So this is the next one. You can see. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is the two-story office block. So this is the dashboard, for this project, which is basically showing real-time fed information. Again, it is not very graphical, but at least there is the summary data like the baseline start date, the start date, the actual start date, which is the same as the baseline start date, the baseline finish date, and the finish date. Okay, so it seems that it is on track, the project duration days and the report date, etc. Now, as I mentioned before, these are examples. So let me go ahead and stop here, sharing. And what I want to do is I want to move to these. So here is another example. All right. Okay, so share. All right. Can we see this one? Not yet. This one, okay. Again, this is in Power BI. This basically shows the status of the bill of material, for a certain project. As I mentioned before, here you can select the department or the location, and from that you can actually go ahead and select the project manager, which basically shows let's say, how many parts deadlines have been approved. This would help you in knowing if there is any kind of things that we have to follow up, right? So, okay, this would help you. I think that I have lost the connection with the data for one reason or another, but that's the idea. This one here is basically showing, again, the documents. And if you have access, then you can click on each one of these. Okay, let me see if you are able to see it. Are we able to see approved specs and deliverables? This one's okay. Let's see. Can you see it? Approved specs and deliverables? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have access to these, the ones that are on the left-hand side, the project title, these are the documents. You can actually go ahead and click on one of them and basically see the details. But I don't have access to these documents. So, delivery approved is 1, ready for delivery is 93, sign off requested is 6. So this would give you an idea of where are we now. All right, and one more thing that I want to show you, which is actually a pure Excel. It's for a web store project. So this is for a web store project. Okay, so let me share it. Can you see it? All right, so this is pure Excel. This is nothing fancy there. This is pure Excel. Actually what is showing here is the website traffic, the number of pages that they have viewed, the conversion rate, and conversion rate meaning that the conversion rate in terms of like, they viewed something and, then eventually they actually became, change it into like, some kind of a financial transactions. This is like the number of orders that have been placed. This basically shows the revenue, etc. This shows the, again, the impact on the earning before interest, taxes, and depreciation and amortization. So, in a nutshell, this is an Excel spreadsheet, nothing fancy. It's connecting to a Microsoft SQL server. It's getting all the data. And then this is real-time data. If you are able to update the SQL server, as transactions are taking place, and you are able, to go ahead and to see, this one. Okay. So that's actually it. Just like, maybe like, one thing, one last slide. This is the slide that I want to share. Okay. All right. So, I mean, these are like, the best practices for effective project dashboards. So dashboards are only as effective as their design. To truly support, actually, to go ahead and to truly support project managers and stakeholders, they need to be clear, they need to be up to date, they need to be user focused, and they need to be actionable. In other words, people who are actually going to go ahead and to look at this particular dashboard, they should be able to, to go ahead and to act on the information that they have seen. So, visual clarity, data must be presented in a way that is easy to understand at a glance. Not overcomplicated visuals reduce effectiveness. There are a lot of material on the internet available for how actually to go ahead and to, what are the guidelines for actually going ahead and designing a dashboard. Dashboards should reflect current metrics. Outdated dashboards, they lose credibility and limit their usefulness. It doesn't really help if you are looking at a dashboard which doesn't show the current situation. It's a user-centric design. So dashboards, they should be tailored to the needs of their audience. Executives, they need a high-level overview. Remember the strategic, while teams, they need detailed task-level view. So, there is the strategic view, there is the tactical view, the operational view, and the individual view. And the actionable items, dashboard should not only display data, but also highlight what decisions or actions they need to be taken. And then the operational loop is data collection, data analysis, dashboard design, and stakeholder communication. Data collection is gathering accurate, relevant data from across the project, which literally means that all the things that you know about project management, they have to be there. So you need to have like a proper monitoring and controlling mechanism. You need to have a schedule that makes sense. You need to have a work breakdown structure. You need to have all the ingredients for earned value management system, etc. So data analysis is when you try to identify patterns, risks, and opportunities. Dashboard design is when you translate these metrics into a meaningful, visual. And then stakeholders communication. You share the dashboard, to align decisions and build trust. So when dashboards follow these best practices and operate within a continuous loop of data collection, analysis, design, and communication, they become powerful tools that align all stakeholders and drive project success. So to see how this loop works, on the next slide, this is basically how the loop looks like. So this basically shows, the different steps, and you can go ahead and, read it on your own. Okay. What I need to do here is actually to go ahead and show you. Are we going to give them a copy of the slides, Anastasia?
George, I think we can discuss about that, but for us it's not a problem.
Okay. Oh, so we have the video, right? You have the video, so they're going to have the video. So anyway, this is information about, well, I think Anastasia can explain this better. Or Maria. I mean, what is, well, I can't, I think this is the contact information and everything, right? Let me show you this. I'm talking about this one here. Can you see it now? No, not yet. You should be seeing it. All right. So this is, I believe, the contact information for the slide, for the.
Да, Джордж, большое тебе спасибо. Коллеги, спасибо вам за
You're most
уделенное
welcome.
время. И мы хотели бы рассказать о нескольких наших программах. Расскажу вам сейчас буквально коротко о каждой. Первая программа — это «Сложные проекты управления рисками», авторская программа Джорджа, которая посвящена глубокому пониманию классического проектного управления, грамотному планированию и управлению рисками. Ближайший поток, собственно, он единственный, мы стартуем и проводим эту программу один раз в год, запускается 6 октября. По формату обучения это 3 полных дня в течение прошу прощения, 3 дня полных в месяц, в течение 3 месяцев у нас 3 модуля, октябрь, ноябрь и декабрь. Джордж работает на оригинальном английском языке, но также с синхронным переводом. Мария будет присутствовать с нами все 3 модуля. Программа проводится очно на кампусе Московской школы управления Сколково. Данная программа будет полезна для команд владельцев бизнесов, руководителей проектов и специалистов проектно-ориентированных компаний. Мы также приветствуем участие команд. У нас уже учились команды таких компаний, как Шлюмберже, ВБРФ, Фонд содействия кредитованию малого бизнеса Москвы и многие другие. Как я и сказала, программа стартует 1 раз в год, и количество мест на данную программу ограничено. Поэтому, если вдруг у вас будет интерес к данной программе, то, пожалуйста, вы можете пройти по QR-коду и связаться с консультантом, с Полиной, либо Полина, возможно, порекомендует кого-то из своих коллег для подробной информации, получите презентацию, сможете задать интересующие вопросы. Jesh, if it's possible, maybe you can check the another one slide. Click for the next one slide, please. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
Thank you. Вторая программа «Переход в data-driven управление» — это практический курс, где вы сможете реализовать проект по внедрению аналитики в вашей компании под руководством более 15 экспертов-практиков. Программа рассчитана на тех, кто хочет быстро получить комплексный результат от выбора инструментов и построения дашбордов до разработки и внедрения аналитических решений, культуры работы с данными, которые приносят измеримый эффект бизнесу. Третья программа «Управление бизнесом на данных». Она подойдет тем, кто хочет научиться использовать данные для стратегического развития принятия эффективных бизнес-решений и внедрять аналитику в процессы. В программе усиленный блок по практическому внедрению генеративного искусственного интеллекта и промптингу для бизнес-задач, игра-симуляция для принятия управленческих решений и ведущие эксперты индустрии из Т-банка, Озона, Яндекса и других. Если данные две программы вдруг могут быть вам интересны, то, пожалуйста, обращайтесь к консультантам. Контакты вы также видите на слайдах. Мы благодарим вас за участие в вебинаре и надеемся, что надолго не прощаемся. Джордж, спасибо тебе за уделенное время. Коллеги, спасибо вам еще раз.
You're most welcome, sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.